The X-Men are supposed to be heroes, but some of their deeds, and honestly questionable stories, make us wonder whether or not they're the characters we should really be rooting for. If you've seen my cosplay of Madelyne Pryor, then you probably know how much I love her, or if you've just heard me talk about her on this channel, I feel like my love of Madelyne Pryor, Amanda talking about Madelyne Pryor, is just a staple at this point. I love Maddie a lot, and so of course one of the worst things an X-Men could ever do is be terrible to her. How dare you? Like how Scott was with Maddie, creating the initial Inferno event basically single-handedly. When Jean was revealed to have survived the Dark Phoenix saga and not actually be dead, Scott decided to just up and abandon his then wife Maddie, who looked just like Jean by the way, and their newborn son, leaving them in Alaska and returning to his teammates. What's worse, when Maddie questioned him about whether or not he still had feelings for Jean, he could not deny it. Yikes. Is this one of the worst moments that Scott has ever had? Let me know in the comments what some of your favorite awful Scott Summers moments are. There's so many, honestly. I love you, Scott, but sometimes Sentinels are bad. All mutants should know this, but apparently at some point in her character's history, Emma Frost forgot about that. Though to be fair, this point isn't just about Emma and her doing something awful as an X-Men, it's also kind of just about this overall event and how it was executed and how some of it was written. There's some things that I take issue with. And honestly, just the fact that it exists in general is kind of weird. In Inhumans vs X-Men, or IVX as it is often referred to, we see the X-Men take on the Inhumans. Why? Because the Inhumans unknowingly poison mutants with their Terrigen clouds. Turns out Terrigen mists are toxic to mutants and can even, kill them. So what does Emma do? Rather than try to come to an understanding with the Inhumans, she seeks revenge for the death of her beloved Scott Summers, aka Cyclops. Emma goes so far as to create a psionic illusory image of Scott and make it seem as though he is directly killed in a confrontation with Black Bolt, when really Scott was simply accidentally killed by the mists. Instead of resolving the conflict, this of course only amps it up, turning Cyclops into a martyr that Emma can basically use to fuel a war. However, while all of this is awful, Emma crosses a serious line when she has Sentinels created to hunt down and exterminate Inhumans. Ugh. Cyclops' powers are weird, and maybe one of the worst things to happen to him in terms of design was when we tried to explain them, making them, honestly, somehow even weirder. Most people would likely assume that Scott Summers has lasers for eyes, which might have been true if we hadn't gotten an in-depth explanation on how his powers work. Currently in the comics, Scott's optic blasts actually are tied to energy absorption and manipulation, with Scott absorbing radiant energy from all around him and it being channeled basically straight into or through his eyeballs. Although the rest of his body is somehow immune to its effects, with even his eyelids acting as a sufficient shield for this massive source of energy. One of my favorite moments actually in the animated show is when Rogue takes Scott's powers by giving him mouth to mouth, and then when she doesn't know how to control them and she's like, what do I do here? And Scott's like, just close your eyes. However, even before that was established, Cyclops' powers were actually explained as being portals to another dimension that was filled with unlimited energy. Yeah, that's apparently a thing that was defined for Cyclops' powers as per the entry that he has in the official handbook of the Marvel Universe from 1983. Oh boy. One of the strangest relationships to have ever existed for the X-Men, or at the very least one of the most controversial relationships to have ever existed, was the one between Archangel and Husk. Now, why was it considered so weird? Well, Angel was one of the first ever X-Men, okay, on the original team back in the 1960s. Now, time works weird in comics, I will grant you that, but Husk was known to be the younger sister of Cannonball, who himself was a much later addition to the X-Men, first appearing almost 20 years after Angel on the New Mutants team in 1982, and the New Mutants are supposed to be kind of like the young kind of X-Men team, just consider that. And Husk, Paige Guthrie, his younger sister, appeared 2 years later than that in 1984. She was believed to be in her late teens or early 20s, while Angel, although somewhat ageless obviously because comics, would likely be in his 30s at least, if not older. And it was implied that he was quite a bit older throughout their relationship still. Add in the fact that these two got busy in the sky above the Guthrie family home, and yeah, I think you can see why this feels pretty problematic. And I know what you're gonna say. You're gonna say, Amanda, what about Wolverine? He's super old. Isn't all that weird? Wolverine doesn't age. It is weird, but I don't know, it's less weird because it's kind of part of his power set, okay? Don't at me on that, alright? Wolverine is for some reason a weird loophole. I acknowledge this, you acknowledge this, that's it. Unless we're pairing him with Mary Jane, and then yeah, that is weird. Now sometimes referred to as the Morlock Massacre, back in the day this was more commonly known simply as a mutant massacre. This was before massive mutant attacks like Genosha ever happened, which is also what made this even so shocking and so horrible at the time. Although it happened obviously on a smaller scale in comparison to some of the things we've seen today, the mutant massacre happened when Mr. Sinister in essence ordered the Morlocks to be eradicated, eliminated. He sent in his team of marauders to handle them and attack, killing many who lived down in the sewers. Now if you're wondering where the X-Men's involvement comes in here, especially if you know the X-Men actively were kind of trying to help the Morlocks here at this time, one of the main people involved in this attack on the marauders at the time was actually Gambit. So yes, while the X-Men were trying to help and even Angel got really badly injured, Gambit was also involved in creating this and making this happen. He'd go on, of course, to become an X-Men and would later have to answer for these crimes. That's how bad they were. They were actually so bad that they kicked Gambit out, so yeah. During the more recent Inferno event, a lot of truths were unearthed about the true allegiances of those who came together to create Krakoa, and just exactly who was behind the whole rise of the mutant island paradise. We already knew the story, but of course not all mutants, in fact not many mutants, did. The truth was that Krakoa was founded by Magneto and Professor X, as well as their ally and friend, long thought dead, Moira McTaggart, who we learned had always been a mutant with reincarnation powers. And we then also learned during the event that Moira, even while helping to build Krakoa, had actually been a villain the whole time, hell-bent on destroying all of mutant kind. Some people love this, some people don't love this, but it was definitely a terrible thing that happened. And, you know, Moira was definitely an ally of the X-Men, so I'm gonna count that. How did we get here? This is a question I sometimes ask myself in regards to the fall of X and the end of the Krakoan era. It's been an interesting journey, friends. We had such remarkable highs during this age, but we've also had some lows too. And while most of it has been good, some of it has been kinda, to be kind, meh. Even from some of my favorite comic book writers, alas. But hey, I'm not going to like everything someone ever writes, right? That's not possible. Well, unless maybe you're Neil Gaiman. But Neil Gaiman was not writing X-Men during this era, which means that, yes, every now and then we're gonna get a weird take that for some of us we're gonna be like, I don't know about that. Case in point, the characterization of Nimrod recently, which some people have been taking issue with. Up to the modern day Inferno event, Nimrod was considered to be a terrifying villain in the comics. In that modern day Inferno, it took everything both Magneto and Charles had to take down this AI enemy, this AI powerhouse. And even then, they were only successful for about a second? More recently, Nimrod has been reduced to a sort of cackling villain in the wings, who is a big buffoonish kind of brute. Case in point when he got himself momentarily disabled by sap. Or rather, amber, that was spat out, I think, by Krakoa. What is happening? Now granted, this next one happened as a result of the Avengers vs. X-Men event, also referred to as AVX. Cyclops ended up killing Professor X because he was possessed by the Phoenix Force. Not really entirely his fault, and ultimately he just had so much power that it corrupted him. But this was also not a great time for Professor X in comic book history. So even if you disagree with Cyclops' actions here and you think, yeah, this is one of the worst things ever, I think you can at least understand why it happened. This awful and tragic moment happened following a time when many dark truths about Xavier and his lies to the X-Men were revealed. Professor X is known for being one of the greatest heroes in comics. He is often celebrated as the man behind the X-Men, the one that brought them together, that forged this amazing team. Without him, the team, simply put, would not exist. So how could he have ever done something bad? How is this possible? Well, the problem with Professor X is that in a way, he and Magneto actually aren't all that different. They might be on different sides of the spectrum when it comes to their beliefs and their politics, but objectively, they're also kind of the same, in the sense that they are both pretty extreme. They're both extremists, I would say, and when it comes to Professor X, there is definitely a darker side to him that he harbors and often hides away, which also often works against him. This often comes out in the way he chooses to manipulate and alter people's minds though. We've seen the results of his tampering in a very bad way when it comes to multiple characters, including Jean, Scott, and worst of all, Magneto. Messing with Magneto's mind ultimately created the nigh unstoppable force that was Onslaught, so thanks for that, Professor X. Professor X's initial feelings about Jean back in the Stan Lee and Jack Kirby days of the X-Men were something else. We all know that Cyclops, aka Scott Summers, has always had a thing for Jean. We also know that Wolverine has, but when it comes to the classic X-Men team, Scott was not the only one. Pretty much everyone was kinda head over heels for Jean at one point, maybe except Bobby, who back in the day liked to flirt but was honestly more in love with ice cream, I would say, than anyone. Even Charles Xavier, Jean's mentor and teacher, was apparently in love with her. Look, Jean was the only female member on the team, so everyone had to be in love with her. Apparently that's how it went. Now, why is it so bad that Professor X was in love with Jean? Well, at the time, it kinda wasn't. The X-Men came across as more young adults than teenagers, so it wasn't like there was like a huge divide there, but in retrospect, it would be established that Charles, as a grown man, had come to Jean's aid when her powers first manifested, when she was implied to be about 8 or 10 years old. Add in the fact that Professor X initially blamed his lack of ability to walk as a reason as to why he couldn't, nay shouldn't, be with Jean, and it's all pretty weird and gross and just in the modern day, you're like, oh no. Number 10 didn't have his priorities straight. I won't deny when I originally wanted to come back to the X-Men, I was more focused on running away. I was behaving recklessly as a result, and eventually it got so bad that the rest of the X-Men called me on it. Embarrassing. Storm ended up challenging me for leadership, and she kicked my butt too, unsurprisingly. I might be a great tactician and a master of trigonometry, but you know, these laser eyes that are really portals to another dimension filled with limitless energy, apparently, have nothing on what my teammate Aurora is capable of. And so I was unable to leave and forced to return to my family, with a lot of my fellow mutants judging me for trying to shirk my responsibilities to my wife and child. Number 9 blasted Wolverine because he dropped a truth bomb. Some might see it that way anyways. I, however, feel like Logan was being very insensitive and disrespectful to Emma and I at the time. Wolverine basically saw Emma Frost and I together following one of Jean's many deaths and harshly judged me. What part of the mourning process is this, he asked us. First of all, he barged in on us, then he started accusing me of not mourning properly? Did I overreact by optic blasting him out of a window? Maybe. I don't know why Logan always has to goad me though. Why can't we just have a calm, reasonable discussion about our feelings? It's almost like he wants me to fight him. Number 8. Re-establish the X-Force. The X-Force is basically a mutant team for when there are missions that don't really fall on brand for the X-Men. Until we had the Hellions, they were kind of like our mutant Suicide Squad, except mostly made up of heroes instead of villains. But these were heroes who weren't afraid of killing when needed. The heroes who were more edgy than the rest of us. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a huge fan of the X-Force really, but I can recognize when the team is necessary, and I know when we need to use them and when it's time to bring that kill squad back together. Unfortunately, not everyone agreed with me. Some questioned my motives, while others have been known to judge me for ordering other mutants to kill while keeping my own hands clean of these deeds. Although in my opinion, ordering someone to kill makes me just as responsible, and it still greatly weighs on my own conscience, which I think is what many people forget. Number 7. Used young mutants as weapons. That's a harsh way of putting it. Professor X did a similar thing with all of us, and I guess a part of me was emulating him in a way. Although at least I didn't use a mutant to train other mutants and tell people it was just a danger room as opposed to a sentient being. But anyways, this became a huge controversy when I suggested that New Mutant Oya do what she felt was right when faced with a hard decision. Poor Oya was only 14 years old, and she already felt terrible about the accidental deaths she'd caused when her powers first manifested. So the wording I used there was poor in terms of providing guidance. I truly believed we were almost out of time and Oya was our only hope, despite Wolverine's pleas that he could still make it in time. As a result, Oya killed members of the Hellfire Club and everyone labeled me as someone who molded our young recruits into ruthless killers and dangerous weapons. Number 6. Exploited X-23. When we originally took Laura Kinney in, I wanted to utilize her, but Wolverine disagreed with me. We needed to get the X-Force back together. I needed that team. I went to Wolverine and explained why, and he was all for it. Although he did mention the fact that I was keeping it from Emma, which, yes, I'm not proud of. We needed to come up with a roster as the team had disbanded. Now, I suggested X-23. Laura Kinney had been trained as a killer and she was highly skilled. She was perfect. But Wolverine felt differently, that she didn't have the life experience to make that choice if offered. I probably should have talked to Wolverine earlier about it, but I'd already offered Laura the spot and she'd accepted. I wanted to utilize her, but Wolverine saw it as me using her. Number 5. Cheated on Jean Grey. So originally I was personally all about Jean Grey. She was perfect for me, I thought, but I don't know. Even I have come to see that Emma, might actually be a better fit for me in the long run. Still, with that being said, it was pretty terrible how that whole thing started. Emma and I were having a psychic affair behind Jean's back. What's worse, I also may have had Emma dress up and emulate Jean within our minds. I mean, she was more the one who offered that, but still, she even changed her hair color. Yeah, it was not good. And what's worse, I knew it was wrong and yet I still went along with it. Eventually, Jean found out, telepathically walking in on Emma and I together. Definitely not a moment I'm proud of. Number 4. Almost made the squirrels extinct. This one made the cut? Really? I feel like I was at least a little justified here, but I guess I could see how this might seem pretty bad, especially as, yes, not all Skrulls are evil. During Secret Invasion, however, I was desperate. I wasn't sure we'd make it, and so I had to take some pretty severe action there. The plan I came up with was to use the Legacy virus as a template to create basically a Skrull version of that virus. A version that targeted and wiped out Skrulls. Now, this worked well, but maybe a little too well, as the Skrull alien race was then kind of at great risk overall because of the virus. Which, yeah, I feel kind of bad about that part. Number 3. Made out on Jean's grave. I mean, this whole storyline was really a strange one. This happened because Jean's psychic ghost told me that it was okay and basically gave Emma and I her blessing after she died. Jean had apparently learned of an alternate future where everything went haywire because I wasn't fit to lead the X-Men and hoped that me finding happiness would be a good way to prevent this from coming about. Emma and I could have been a little more tasteful though, perhaps, when it came to the location in which we chose to express our feelings for one another. In retrospect, Jean's grave was probably not a good place for a makeout session. Number 2. Killed Professor X. Wow, okay. How can you really blame me for this one? I wasn't even myself at the time, must I remind you? So basically what had happened at this point was the Phoenix Force had returned to Earth during Avengers vs. X-Men. It had taken hold of 5 of us after Tony Stark split it up. Divided, the power was manageable to hold on to, but it also made it easier for the Avengers to defeat us. Slowly, those who were part of the Phoenix 5 were defeated and fell away. I was one of the last people to hold onto the power, which meant, yeah, I kind of flew off the handle, and yeah, I kind of stole that last power from Emma Frost. The professor tried to talk me down and I just was not having it, so I took that power and I killed him. But afterward, I felt really bad about the whole thing, and even agreed that I needed to be basically put under arrest for my crimes. I didn't feel good about that one either, although some may have believed that Professor X had it coming. Number 1. Abandon his family. Okay, this is probably in retrospect one of the worst things I've done in the comics. After Jean died, I never thought I'd love again, until I met Madelyne Pryor. Maddie was something else, and what's more, she weirdly resembled Jean. Like, we're talking almost identical. For a while, I thought she actually might be the reincarnation of Jean's soul, but then I thought, nah, that's silly. She probably has no relation to Jean whatsoever. We got married, had a son together, everything was going great, then Jean came back from the dead. Or she wasn't really ever dead? Anyways, it's all very confusing. Either way, she was back, that was all that mattered, so I returned to the X-Men, which kinda meant abandoning my wife and son in Alaska. Yeah. Maddie didn't take it too great, especially after she learned she was actually a clone of Jean Grey made by Mr. Sinister for the sole purpose of mating with me. She got pretty evil and ensorcelled my brother to boot, and my leaving was a big motivation for her transformation from innocent bystander to evil sorceress whose powers mirrored and were on a similar scale to Jean's.
Number 10. Cyclops and Wolverine's Schism. Schism was basically Wolverine and Cyclops fighting over ideologies, particularly ideologies surrounding the young mutants' minds that they were subjecting to danger literally all the time. Wolverine believed in a more nurturing parental approach, while Cyclops had the idea to treat these youngins like soldiers. Cyclops' approach is bad enough, but the whole initiation of this fight was another low for the mutant Boy Scout. Cyclops founded Utopia, giving mutants a place to live, but a place that was now being threatened by a new Hellfire Club that attacked a group of young X-Men at a museum opening, taking hostages. Cyclops and Wolverine were racing to get there, but were too slow, so, to Wolverine's horror, Cyclops ordered teenage mutant Oya to de-life all the Hellfire soldiers, which she did successfully. The fight between Cyclops and Wolverine then split the mutant community down the middle. Number 9. X-Men vs. Inhumans. The Inhumans were an offshoot of humanity that were experimented on by the Kree, gaining powers from a process called Terrigenesis, using Terrigen mists. Now it turns out, these mists are basically poisonous to the mutant population, and mutants were hurt when mists were released on Earth. The Inhumans in response felt pretty bad and were all for some kind of peaceful resolution to the issue. But Emma Frost made a whole plan that all the mutants, including the X-Men, agreed to except for Beast, Forge, and Rogue. Emma also basically staged the passing of Cyclops at the hands of Black Bolt of the Inhumans to get the mutants to fight back against the Inhumans, who weren't even trying to fight in the first place, causing a whole war between the two groups. It makes no sense, but that's how it is, I guess. If you guys love mutants and these videos, be sure to drop a quick like on this video. It's all you gotta do to show us your support. Thanks, nerds. Number 8. Danger. While working to upgrade the Danger Room by installing Shi'ar technology one night, the Danger Room spoke to Professor Xavier and asked, "Where am I?" Realizing that the Danger Room had mutated and become alive, but still needing to train his X-Men, Professor Xavier made the choice to just ignore and hide the life form from his X-Men. Not smart, since later, the Danger Room began to control other machines in an attempt to gain a body. After sending an Omega Sentinel to battle the X-Men, the Danger Room convinced a student at the school, Wing, to de-life himself, which resulted in the breaking of its prime directive and the physical manifestation of the being named Danger, taking on a female appearance. After locking all of the students in a nightmarish simulation, Danger battled and defeated the X-Men, then went on to do a whole bunch of much worse things herself. Number 7. Wolverine. In Wolverine Origins number 29, it's revealed that Wolverine was originally sent to assassinate Xavier as a member of the secret Weapon X experiments. Xavier, obviously able to read Wolverine's mind, sees the attack coming and thwarts it by brainwashing the aggressive Canadian into becoming a member of the X-Men. He removed a bunch of old memories, implanted some new ones, and basically left Wolverine's mind a confused mess. But Xavier managed to get what he wanted, which is a powerful weapon to fight for his cause, so good job, dude. Number 6. The Phoenix 5. In the 2012 crossover event Avengers vs. X-Men, the Cosmic Phoenix Force was coming to Earth, and when it arrived, it was split up into 5, giving our heroes a new problem in the form of the Phoenix 5. The quintet consisted of X-Men veterans including Cyclops, Emma Frost, Namor, Magik, and Colossus, who began reshaping the world according to their will until they themselves became a threat. As each member of the 5 fell, those left standing got more and more powerful, leaving Scott and Emma, who were becoming more tyrannical by the minute. To stop the two of them, Professor X was recruited by Magneto, but the cosmic entity had consumed Scott and even basically made him betray Emma Frost to gain more power. After a mental battle between him and Xavier, Scott used his power to actually take the life of his father figure, mentor, and dear friend, becoming the Dark Phoenix until he was defeated by Hope Summers and Scarlet Witch. And at number 5 is X-Force. X-Force. The X-Men Black Ops team. Cyclops' own little hit squad. There are more than a few not so great things this sub-team has done. Cyclops forcing X-23 to be on the team, performing assassinations, etc, etc. It's all bad. But after Cyclops disbanded the team, Wolverine kept it going on his own, and they took on a bit of a sinister task when they decided to take out a younger cloned version of Apocalypse to prevent him becoming a threat. This particular assassination almost didn't go through, but then Phantom X just popped the little clone in the head. Yes, it's incredibly messed up, but hey, then he cloned the clone and raised it in a virtual reality to give it all the nurturing it needed to be a good Apocalypse. Number 4, Professor X Mind Wipe. Professor X has a history of just impulsively wiping and manipulating people's minds, which never goes well in the long run, but for some reason, he just keeps doing it, even to those he considers friends and colleagues. Reed Richards, with whom Xavier worked with on the Illuminati, which is a whole other bad time, feared for his son's life and built a machine that would take away a mutant's powers. Reed's son, Franklin Richards, is an incredibly powerful being with reality warping abilities and was believed to be a mutant, mutant, which he wasn't, but that's another story. Professor X took exception to the machine that Reed built, so he completely wiped away the knowledge of the machine from Richards' mind. He made sure that Richards would never be able to build another one ever again, tampering with the mind of a man he used to call a friend. Number 3, Professor X Mind Wipe Mark II. It's not just colleagues that Professor X has manipulated. No sir, not by a long shot. But in Giant Size X-Men number 1, Charles Xavier has to put together a brand new X-Men team thanks to the fact that his original X group is being held captive by the living island Krakoa. However, we learn later that this new team wasn't the only one, because Professor X already sent out another new squad of X-Men to save his original team, and they were all horribly killed. Vulcan, Sway, Darwin, and Petra all seem to perish at the hands of Krakoa, and rather than admit his poor decision making, getting a bunch of mutants killed in action, Charles erases the minds of everyone who knew about this team, including Vulcan's older brother, Cyclops, which came and bit him in the butt when Vulcan turned out to be alive and came for some revenge. Number 2, Beast and Terra Verde. After the mutant nation of Krakoa was founded with its various different organizations and groups, the former X-Men Hank McCoy was put in charge of the intelligence wing of X-Force, which was the mutant nation's equivalent to something like the CIA, for example. This means that Beast is now one of the shadiest damn mutants you ever did see, and one of the most prominent examples of just how shady he now is comes in his response to an attack from the Republic of Terra Verde. Beast modifies the telefloronic biotech of the country of Terra Verde to take complete control of that country and its people. From there, he used them to seed telefloronic listening devices in embassies and basically used the state as a puppet for intel gathering. Hank transformed the nation into a literal puppet state and robbed its people of their free will. And in at number 1 is the secret of mutant resurrection. This one is gonna split a few people, and I'm kind of even on the fence about this one. Basically, if you don't know, in recent comics, mutants on their new nation of Krakoa have devised a means of resurrecting their own using a group of 5 mutants known, surprisingly, as the 5. Resurrection in comic books happens on an almost absurd basis, but this proven method of consistently bringing back the dead is different, and the mutants are very aware of that fact and even go to great lengths to keep it a secret from the rest of the world. The reason kinda makes sense, as 1, they can't really bring back non-mutants anyways, and 2, the amount of people who would be outraged at the fact that the mutants are allowed to revive themselves but us regular humans have to suffer through all the pain and loss of losing a loved one and can't do anything about it, it would just cause mass outrage and further turn the world against mutants. Still, devising the means for resurrection and not even trying to inform the world? Kinda hella sus.